if you think in human terms, it could have been different. And Abraham's faith is a great example because the alternative examples we have in the Bible who people who are behaving badly.
And indeed, right, God can carry on the story regardless of how we choose to interact with his story. He can get his purpose accomplished through the means of the righteous or through the means of the unrighteous. When we look at the genealogy of Jesus, for example, we see several figures who probably shouldn't be considered righteous at all, who um, society would label as among the worst of people. And yet, God carries on the story. When the nation of Israel rebels against God and isn't following him, he uses pagan kings, worshippers of idols and foreign gods, to accomplish his purpose. So he can use whatever he needs to use. Yet, when a human being participates in that story voluntarily in faith, there's something special about it. God doesn't need anyone to be faithful in order to accomplish his purposes. But when a human being is faithful, that has a special place in
Mm.
the story. And that's what Paul is saying here as well. That Abraham stands as a special example, not because he was like naturally more righteous than anyone else, not because his actions were perfect. Indeed, he lived 99 years basically as an ordinary human being, no doubt. Well, granted that the specific Mosaic law hadn't been given, but the moral law is written on our conscience. So he no doubt violated his own conscience, did things that he knew were wrong, and yet those 99 years are just thrown away. And it's as if he was already dead and was brought back to life. And he could have looked at his situation and said, yeah, I'm an old man, my time has passed. Even God couldn't help me here. But he hoped against hope, right? He did not allow his observations, his rational thoughts about his body, about Sarah's body, to overcome God's promise. He said, if God has promised it, it doesn't matter what it looks like to my eyes. And for that reason, he's counted as righteous, and God fulfills his promise first given as he's throwing Adam and Eve out of the garden, that the serpent will be crushed. He fulfills that promise through Abraham. He could have he could have done something else, right? If Abraham had said no, right? He called Abraham and he said no. He could have called someone else. He could have worked out his story in a different way. He didn't need Abraham, but because Abraham chooses to participate, God values that greatly. And the same is true for us. He doesn't need any of us. He doesn't need human beings to worship him. He doesn't need human beings to fulfill his desire for relationship because he's triune. He's relational by his very nature. He doesn't need human beings for love. He's love by nature. And yet, because he is those things, when we choose to participate in those things, it brings joy to God. It brings blessings upon us, and it makes the world bright.